Good morning. No matter how many of these sessions I do, I normally always forget to wear trousers. And so I'm very proud that I have actually learnt something, and I'm in pants today, sitting up on stage.
We can dance.
Yeah. So it gives me great pleasure to be part of an experience rather than a conference, and to be able to sit in front of all of you today and alongside my former CEO, one of my mentors, and also one of my friends, Rudy Karsan. It's a really informal talk show setting this morning for the next 30 minutes. And you know, when I think about what we heard this morning, hopefully it's provocative, hopefully it's playful, and what I think you'll see is two very passionate people that can't ever stick to a script. So I have this in front of me, and I'm not really sure why, but let's see. So, you know, when I think about this topic around changing the way work works, I am someone who's grown up in the world of HR consulting and management consulting, and I reflect on the things that I've learned from when I was in leadership development, helping executives manage burnout, when I was driving inclusion and diversity agendas at a global level, and the reflection was, no matter how many times you take the fish out of the pond to clean the fish, it will always get dirty if you put it back into a dirty pond. And then also, you know, spending a lot more of my time more recently helping organizations restructure and think about how they better optimize and set up for things like digital transformation. It was always, you know, we kind of always fell over right at the end of these projects when it came to placing people in boxes and thinking about how did you realize an organizational structure when it came to thinking about the people who were already in your organization. So I kind of reflected ahead of this, and I thought that, you know, for too long as leaders, as HR consultants, as practitioners, as researchers, we've spent a lot of time thinking about the need for change. And we've spent a lot of time strategizing for it, planning for it, tweaking language to make it sound more relevant and modern age, and thinking about just how we tweaked current processes to maybe better set us up for future. Mercer released only yesterday our global talent trends for 2019, and I was really excited to see that for the very first time, almost 4 out of 5 executives responded that they are already a foot ahead and feel that they're ahead and can disrupt the industry themselves rather than be disrupted by it. And 99% of respondents across the entire survey globally said that they were actually embedding actions rather than just planning and talking about it. So that really was pleasing for me to see. But you know, when I think about the topic today, who better to sit on stage with than Rudy Karsan, who is the man really responsible, in my eyes, for disrupting the technology space around recruitment and employee engagement surveys. The individual who helped pivot the behemoth IBM into the IBM space when he sold Connexa to IBM back in 2013. And also, you know, the person that I think that has made actuaries seem cool. So apologies to all the actuaries that work for me at Mercer, but it's very interesting to see someone who started a different career and take a different career track. I want to start really big if we can, because it's a big topic. So really looking at organization changes that we're seeing and what that means for work. And then, you know, hopefully we can pivot to what it means to individuals, because like Esther said, a lot of this starts with us here, and this is an opportunity for us to completely rethink the way that we are doing things as employees. So you know, Rudy, you are a very experienced entrepreneur. You're a business leader. You've run very small organizations through to some of the biggest organizations in the world. You are recently not recently, you've been in the venture capitalist space for a while, but you continue to make small but very steep outcome-based investments in the world of HR technology. And I think so today we'd like to hear from you around what are the global trends that you're seeing, and you know, where do you think that impact is happening at a corporate level, and what can we expect?
Thanks, Peta. Good morning, everyone. Come on, man. Good morning, everyone. So sitting next to Peta makes me feel like a loser, and let me explain to you why. I started work in Toronto as an actuary. And as an actuary, my goal in life was to become a principal at Mercer. They never even hired me. And now I'm sitting next to the CEO of Mercer. I mean, that's where life takes you. Let me ask a question so I can contextualize it, just by show of hands. If I put two lenses in front of you, the lens of my organization, and if I put the lens of myself when I'm responding to the questions, which lens would you prefer me to use? The organization lens, raise your hands. The personal lens, raise your hands.
Hey, very good.
You can't be on the fence here, guys. If we've only got 25 minutes, you got to give me one direction. Organizational lens, raise your hands. Personal lens, raise your hands. Okay. Then let me respond from a personal lens perspective. What are the trends that are happening? Are some of the things that Esther talked about, right? There's just an incredible amount of innovation that's taking place. And the dimensions of innovation are on space, technology, communications, med tech, immunotherapy. I mean, there is just there's about 8 massive waves that are coming down the pike. And these are significantly going to be changing the workforce and organizations. Nobody really understands how, where, when, or why, but it's going to change. And this is exciting. Our basic life is going to extend. Our quality of life is going to improve. And this is a very dramatic trend that's coming down. There is a second trend that's coming down that's affecting all of us, and that jobs are in a bear market. They're getting decimated because of all these changes. And in 2020 will be the first year in the United States where there will be more independent workers than full-time workers. So think about that for a second. There's going to be more independent workers than full-time employees in 2020. When I started my career in the 70s, the number was closer to 78-22. We're now going to be at 49-51. These two major global mega trends is creating a third trend, and that's anxiety. The change is coming so dramatically that I am excited about the future while I'm going to be losing my job. And that scares the heck out of me. And that has resulted in a moron as a president of the United States. That has resulted in the breakdown of the European Union, which was the most peaceful area and era Europe had seen in about 75 years. That has resulted in the arrival of the strongmen political leaders because we can't make a decision. So if somebody tells us what to do, we'd rather have a strong person telling us what to do than making the decision ourselves because we're so scared and anxious about these two mega trends. So that's going to be the impact, and that's the context for yourself for the rest of these questions.
So I find this really interesting. So when we were prepping ahead of time, we were discussing our views on this, personal experiences. Are we anxious? And like any good Gen Y, and I like to say I'm on the cusp of Gen Y, I said, no, this is fantastic. I'm really excited. This gives me a lot of opportunity, and I think it's leveling the playing field to do whatever I've ever wanted to do. And your response as someone who, in my eyes, and I think a lot of people's eyes, as someone very experienced, already successful, was, I'm shit scared. Pardon my French, well, pardon your French, actually, at the time when you said that.
I did use this S-H-I-T word.
Yeah,
go ahead.
So I'm interested around why you personally say that you're concerned and worried and have this feeling of anxiety.
Roger Martin has written the book, The Opposable Mind, probably the single best business book I've read, which is the ability to hold different concepts in your head simultaneously. So I am absolutely terrified and I am absolutely excited simultaneously. The reason I am really scared is because these two major trends that I talked about has created segments in the workforce that no one is willing to admit to. When you read the CEO's letter, they will say our employees are our biggest asset. That is the biggest pile of crap that has ever been invented. They don't mean it, and the people that read it don't believe it. Because our employee pool has 4 segments in it: full-time, independent worker, core, and strategic. If you are part of full-time and strategic, you're part of that top 10% whose income is growing faster than GDP growth. Chances are more than half of you in this room belong in that segment. So life is treating you really good right now. If over the last 5 years, your income hasn't kept up with inflation, you're part of the core group and you have to be terrified because your job is going to disappear. If you're already part of the gig economy, you're part of the core gig economy, like the Grab driver, your life sucks. You don't want to be there. And if you're part of the independent worker, strategic employee, like Beyonce's giving some sort, or being paid millions of dollars to basically talk about a product in one of her concerts, life is wonderful. So depending on what segment you're in, it's either terrific or you got to be scared. And the reason you got to be scared is if we don't solve this problem, there will be a rupture in the society as we know it. Because automation is coming, and our most valuable 3 moral drivers is our personal link to our job. It forms our identity, it forms the reason why we exist, and it forms the basis of all our relationships. You can't even find a spouse today if you don't have a great job, quote unquote. So it doesn't matter who you are, it's what you do. And what you do is going to become maybe irrelevant. And your entire relevance is being questioned. So how do you think about it from your personal perspective? Because you're married to this notion called job. And you're married to this notion called career advancement. And you're married to this notion called wealth expansion. And if my moral compass and my value system rests on this stool, what happens if the legs start to get shaky or loose? Do I fall over or do I just very gently stand up? Well, in order for me to gently stand up, my muscles have to be well developed. Because if I've been sitting in this position for 20 years, these have atrophied. And so as I look at my career, I am not going to be sitting on the 3 legs. I'm going to have those 3 legs, and I'm going to have my 2 natural legs to allow me to stand up as that stool starts to shake. So workforces are going to get materially affected by these changes. You personally can lead an exciting life or a dreaded life. But because you are in this room today, somebody has deemed you successful. Esther has deemed me successful to put me on stage. Peta has deemed me successful to allow me in her presence. Somebody paid for you. Somebody honored you by allowing you to be here. You are already successful. Once you embrace that notion, you now have a choice whether I wish to continue to be successful, in which case I have to have my natural legs, or I am going to sit here in my chair and watch myself atrophy. That is your choice. You are not vulnerable now, yet. The longer you sit, the more vulnerable you will become.
I'm feeling like I need to go and do some Python courses and some agile training and probably think about the next steps. But so this is a really interesting concept here about core versus strategy, because it has two points for me. One, exactly to your point, if we are in this room and we think that we are already successful and in that strategic part, how do we make sure that we stay in that space and embrace the opportunities? But also, what is our responsibility? Because most of the people here will be leading teams, and in this corporate world, talking about the fact that employees are the most important elements of the business success. What is our obligation as well to help the core? Because, I think the thing that you said around the world changes when there's revolution. So this split between core and strategy actually is the start of the next big revolution we should be expecting. And we shouldn't be blindsided by it. And we also shouldn't have negative fallout from revolution, because hopefully we've learned from the others. So what's the balance between what do we need to do to make sure that we are successful in enjoying this trend and leveraging it, and also what is our obligation to people who are potentially less privileged or afforded the opportunities we are?
Let me start at the very top. The modern corporation was primarily formed in the West and has a Christian ethos to it. The Christian ethos is one of equality. So everyone is equal. Except when you're not, in which case you're a heathen and it's okay for me to kill you. So you either convert to my religion or my faith, or you're irrelevant. That really fundamentally kind of forms the basic ethos of a corporation. You're either on my side, in which case you're along the journey with me and we're all equal, and you're our employees and we're going to share the wealth and all these nice and wonderful things, or you're my competition, in which case I will kill you. With that basic ethos in place, compassion in our morality code sits pretty low. We can only afford to be compassionate once our greed is met, because we don't have time or energy or the soul or the mind to absorb compassion until our basic need is met, because we work in corporations. So let me approach you and say, first take care of yourself. Here are two things. Forget about your career. It is completely irrelevant. Think about your experiences. Now you have a choice to put into your experience bucket more money, emotional experiences, quality of the journey, time off, whatever is important in your values. If you stay on the career path, you are sitting on the chair, because that career will not exist. Nobody is capable of predicting the future. The past has shown that career pathing and career growth is the way to go. I'm here to argue that statement is no longer true. Once you have replaced your experiences with your career, you will replace your learnings with your time. By that I mean, we as individuals spend a tremendous amount of time doing what others tell us to do, whether it's our customers or our bosses or our spouses or our children or what have you. The greed begins at the selfishness of I want to spend a certain amount of time learning. Let me share a very personal example with you. When Peta was talking to me about this reinventing work, and the comment she said that I said I was shit scared, here's the reason. I spend approximately 4 hours a day learning. I read over 100 books a year and attend 3 separate conferences and isolate an hour a day where I can not only meditate but also think. I am concerned that that's not enough. Because the rate at which the knowledge is coming in far surpasses my ability to not only accept it, but then digest it and say, so what with that information I get? I'm scared because I don't know how much more capacity to absorb new information I have. I am aging, my brain cells are slowing, I can't run as fast as my grandkids, and at my daughter's wedding, in my speech, I pleaded with my younger daughter, wherever life takes you, you've always engaged me in your life. Please don't bench me or make me irrelevant. My big fear is about relevance. Somebody else's might be about money. Somebody else's might be about time. But once you understand what it is, I know that learning is a driver. So stop doing the work that others tell you and start learning. Stop going down the career path and start the experience path.
So this really resonates with me because one of the challenges I've had stepping into this role is the spare time. So you have 10 hours of solid this is the reality, 10 hours of solid back-to-back meetings, travel on either side, 2 to 3 countries a month. And you've got somebody who desperately wants to be able to assimilate the information that she's learning in order to make better decisions and think about what I do at a corporate level for the teams of people that work with me and for me. So it's an easy thing to say. It's a very, very hard thing to execute. And in some ways, it's much easier to execute the more senior you become because you have more control to make those decisions. But you know, how in a day-to-day environment for most people who are working in middle management to senior management would you advise that they start to make those changes?
So if you're going to be reinventing the way work works, the first thing you got to do is reinvent the way you work. Choices are something that you're blessed with. I go back to what I said a few minutes ago. If you embrace the fact that you're successful because somebody has deemed you to be successful and that's why you're in this room, you then have the power of choice. I'll use a very simple but specific example. When my first child was born, I had to absorb a new life in my day-to-day activities. To be true to this new baby, I forswore watching television. The number of movies that I saw last year was 1. The last television show I saw was Star Trek: Last Generation. I stopped watching TV and stopped watching movies. I was a huge sports fan with season tickets to 4 different sporting events. My second child was born. Something had to give. My love for sports was less than my love for my second child. She was born in 1987. I made that decision in 88. The first time I spent an hour at a sporting event was 4 years ago when my son-in-law, who's Argentine, asked me to watch the finals with him, the World Cup finals with him. So it was bonding time with my son-in-law rather than watching sports. So that was fundamental life choices that I made. What is the choice you're going to make tomorrow to open up your life? Because if you're going to invent the way you work, you then form the foundation to reinventing the way work works. It is going to be an individual journey rather than a societal revolution. And that individual journey will determine the outcome of the way work works. Because data is the new gold, as you hear, but you don't really comprehend what that means. But that's where the new billionaires are being formed. The ones who are controlling the data. And you're voluntarily giving that up. Because if you think about it for a moment, I'm not on Facebook because I refuse to work for free. Facebook has 2 billion employees working for free, creating an ecosystem whereby they get paid for your effort so others can consume. You, in effect, are a free employee of Facebook. So if you want to make the choice, stop being an employee of Facebook. You're not a subscriber to Facebook. Don't fool yourself. Your meaningful relationships exist beyond the Facebook realm. You choose to work to them for free so that you can either entertain yourself or you can get even with the person you don't like to show them how great your life is. So you're being trivial and petty about your emotions or you're entertaining yourself. That's your choice. I chose not to work for Facebook for free.
I work for Facebook for free every day. All right. And now that they come up with that pop-up screen time that says you've spent 4 hours and 35 minutes on average on your phone, and that's just my work phone before I get to my personal phone is an issue. So I just want to pick on two things. So, I think all of us go to these types of sessions and we all listen. And one of the big questions I always ask panelists is, give us a top tip. Like, what are you doing to stay ahead of the curve? And, sometimes people will say things like, you should be reading The New Scientist. Make sure that you're expanding your thinking beyond what you're doing day to day. And me, like any good audience member, always goes back. I subscribe to pretty much every magazine out in the marketplace. I try and read it. Again, I set aside time on Saturdays in the morning to go through different types of thinking, what is happening in the health tech space, what is happening in agriculture, what is happening in Africa. But the hardest part for me is it's so outside my daily frame of reference. So, you're still spending 12 to 16 hours a day, a lot of us, either in work or thinking about work. So when you're pushing yourself to be curious and think outside that, sometimes it's just too far outside your daily frame of reference. So how do you maintain that level of enthusiasm and go through this journey? Because I think your ask is trust that this is going to change, so keep doing the personal investments in yourself. But how do we maintain that level of motivation when it doesn't necessarily reward us in what we're doing today?
Does anyone here speak Mandarin? If I use the word busy in Mandarin, isn't it slowly dying put together? Yeah. I mentioned that to Peta last night over dinner. She didn't believe me, and we Googled it. Yeah. So I would say to you, stop being busy. Therefore, stop slowly dying. It's difficult to stop being busy because the most important list I have, and it's in writing on a pad next to my desk, is my stop doing list.
Right. I really think that's good.
The stop, thank you, at least one person buys the argument. Everyone else thinks I'm full of it. Yeah, okay. The stop doing list gives you the gift of time. Now, I've had a lot of people say to me, well, really, it's different. You've sold companies and you made a ton of money, and you sit in this world that's in this atmosphere that's rarefied and the rest of us don't belong, and it's wonderful for you to say all these things. And my response was, how do you think I got there? Because I was an immigrant 3 times over. And the first piece of furniture was a carpet that my brother and I got from the garbage dump that we cleaned. And I had to rely on the goodwill of my uncle, otherwise we would be homeless. That doesn't show greatness. It simply shows the ability to make choices and stop being busy. And so the best piece of advice I can give you is one takeaway. Make sure your longest list is your don't do list.
Yeah.
You'll be amazed at the gifts that will emanate in your life if you stop doing things. Whatever you choose.
I love that. Thanks. Now I'm going to have half my team come back and say no to the list of activities I've asked them to do. But this is just to close. I think that's an incredibly important point. And here in Singapore, we love this phrase: fly the plane and change the landing gear at the same time. And I think all of us, this idea of keep BAU or business as usual running whilst you're looking at outperformance and next steps and innovation and thinking outside the box is very difficult to do. So keep the stop list longer than the start list. Rudy, we never ever stick to script, ever.
Why did you do that?
I don't know. It wasn't my fault. I blame you. But thank you. We've covered a broad range, and I'm conscious that we ended on a good note then. But I do want something really positive. Tell me something, one of the best experiences that you've had through all of this changes that you would impart, so we can lift the room rather than feeling a bit, oh, I better go and do something different.
Esther, do I have 2 more minutes, or is it 0?
You've got 1 minute. Go.
1 minute. Okay, let me start with a very short story. I was born in Mombasa, Kenya. I used to swim in the ocean because we didn't have enough swimming pools, and I was actually training for the Olympics. Even though I'm fat today, I wasn't then. When I used to swim in the ocean, I would constantly get buffeted by the waves and get sick because of it. And it was a miserable experience till one day I discovered that I could ride the waves rather than get buffeted by the waves. And that was a spiritual experience where I was able to get joy and exhilaration and the feeling of weightlessness. Once I learned how to ride the waves, I still drank the seawater and I still felt sick and I got buffeted. But now I learned how to ride and I look forward to it. So my thoughts and prayers are that may you get the same joy and exhilaration from riding the waves of change that are coming, like I got from riding the waves in Mombasa, Kenya when I was swimming. Good luck and God bless.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.